Hi, April. Thank you for taking time to be with us today. For anyone in our audience that's not already familiar with you, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing and what you plan on talking about today?
Sure. My name is Apryl Schlueter. I am a happiness and productivity coach and also the author of the book Finding Success in Balance, My Journey to the Cheerful Mind. I basically help busy, career-driven people have more fun while getting stuff done, and that must be all in a nutshell.
Perfect. That does lead to one quick question. So what is the triple mind?
The cheerful mind. So this whole concept of being happy and really just having a fulfilling life at the very end of the day has always been something that I've been really passionate about. And I've been through a slew of different careers. I have a degree in electrical engineering and, have really worked through a bunch of different types of jobs, just trying to find a job that would fulfill my personal passions and something that I could, really be passionate about. But I also wanted to enjoy all of the things outside of life, such as my family, spending time with my friends, going on vacations. And I've just been one of those people who has always been a very career-driven person. And sometimes jobs get really demanding and sometimes it's okay. But when it gets to the point where the stress is too high and you're not enjoying yourself, I've definitely struggled with that. And so when I took the leap into this career path, I decided that I wanted to help people who have feel that same stress and really desire a better work-life balance and a quality of life. And so I am here to help them with that. And, thinking about really infusing more joy and happiness and positive mindset while doing all the things that we have to do in life, accomplishing goals, just even managing time in general, and really, just having more fun.
Perfect. Well, I think it's a lot of thing. I'm sorry. I think that's a thing a lot of business owners miss out on. So that's great to talk about. So do you think having a cheerful mindset, I see you talking about that a lot, writing about that a lot. Do you think that's the thing that we have to focus on the most? Is that more important than having a focused mindset or a driven mindset as a business owner? Maybe just because we forget about it, or does that lead to the other things being better? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of people want to be efficient and effective, and, there's so many things on either an entrepreneur's or a small business person's plate, and we're juggling a whole bunch of things. And so there's this piece of wanting to do things effectively and efficiently. And there's definitely the ability to implement strategies around that. So productivity things, really, staying focused. But one of the things I realized in my journey is that sometimes we spend a lot of time on things that are not conducive to being productive. And mindset is actually a huge piece of that. And, it was one of those things that I didn't even realize how much more productive I could be once I started infusing more positive psychology in my life and those types of practices, because then you're staying out of the time that you're stressed. And usually when you're stressed, you're not really focusing on the big picture. So if you can think with a more positive mindset, you can actually accomplish more and get more done. And it's definitely not something that people think about, especially those who are more analytical and in that sense, because happiness is more of a tapping into your intuition and dealing with more emotion, and sometimes it's hard to tap into that when you're always on the go.
Absolutely. And you do talk about productivity a lot, and you talk about the importance of routines and rules and daily living. Why is that important to a business owner in particular? And as part of your routine and rules, making sure that you're taking time to put that happiness in there.
Absolutely. So I think that, and this is something that I mentioned in my book, there's two different things about planning and productivity. To some extent, it's really important to have some sort of plan, so that you're always moving forward. If you spend a lot of time winging it, you can kind of be thinking about, spending a lot of time trying to make decisions on how to move forward, and that's obviously not productive. At the same time, there's this need for flexibility, because of course, as we move forward in our businesses, new things are introduced, trends change, and in all of that stuff that we do. So we have to be able to adjust to that, especially with growing technology. If you're running an online business, there's always new things introduced. And, you might have settled in on a podcast, but then all of a sudden there's Facebook live shows and all of these different things that you can do. And so you kind of have to always keep up with the time. So having a general plan and strategy is good, but also allowing for flexibility is important as well. And when you think about the personal side of things, obviously, if you're always on the go, there's a big chance of burnout. So you always have to almost sometimes slow down so that you can continue the momentum. And so, of course, business ebbs and flows. Sometimes things are moving really fast. You're working toward a launch and you need to be on the ball. But if you can also plan for some space to kind of recuperate and recharge, you can actually keep that productivity up. And then, on a day-to-day basis, it's good to have routines, but sometimes, life just gets in the way, whether it be your outside life or things in your business. So being able to kind of give yourself enough buffer time to, check your email and do some of that stuff, it keeps the overwhelm down and all that. So, yeah.
Good. Well, I think that leads to a really good question, too. Your average business owner, your average busy person in general, probably already feels pretty overwhelmed. How do they find that motivation and the time that they don't think they have to start putting some of these routines in place that are so important, or to start making time for themselves that they don't think they have?
One of the things that I like to do when people are asking, how do I find more time? Because when you're already strapped for time, you feel like adding a new strategy or doing something on top of everything that you have is very, very overwhelming. And so I always like to start with doing some small things. I think even starting with creating some time and space to do some planning is key. What I like to personally do just in general is, take every Sunday or, a couple hours a week where I sit down and I look at my calendar and just, go 2 weeks out maybe and just take a look at, what are the things that I have on my plate? What are the things that I need to do in preparation for these things that are happening in the next 2 weeks, and starting to create some buffer time to make sure that they plan. So really, really leveraging a calendar so that you're not getting yourself in an overcommitted space. But just even starting with some planning time makes a huge impact in your ability to kind of keep the ball rolling. And it's something that we need to do. And usually we just add stuff, on the calendar and then just go. But sometimes, oh no, we're not as prepared for this meeting as we'd like to be. So really giving yourself that space to plan. And even if you don't want to do it once a week, or you want to be able to do it on a daily basis, to just even carve out 30 minutes of your day to just be open to some of the things that come up and go with the flow on that. So that's kind of the first step, but then it's also identifying some of the things that suck the time away from you and being able to, make decisions on how to get rid of those. So I'm big on getting rid of your time suckers.
Okay, well, quick question, follow up to that then.
Yeah.
Are you big on saying no more often, or are you big on delegating more, or both?
Both, definitely. I'm one of those people who really believes that if you want to try to do it all, then it's possible, but it might not necessarily be executed by you or in the way that you want. So really, really being clear on what your priorities are and making those commitments to the things that you choose to do. And if there's still stuff that you want to do, but maybe it's not your area of expertise, is there a way that you can delegate that? Or is there a way that you can collaborate with another business who might have the same, who might be your competition, but how you can support each other to get more things done? As an example, I have a colleague who works in the same space as me, and we have the very same message of how work-life balance can actually be accomplished. And she created an online course, and I have not done that yet, but I do a lot of coaching and speaking, and that's something that she would like to do right now, but she is in the middle of having another kid, and so she's trying to do things that are at home, and so we're figuring out how to collaborate and do revenue shares and stuff like that. But it's beneficial for both of us, and I don't have to create a course now because she's got this wonderful course that's already out there and existing. So I'm able to, get more done in my business and help somebody else out at the same time. So it serves multiple priorities of mine.
That's a smart strategy. And I think that question and something you brought up kind of lends itself to each other too. Single parent business owners, single working parents that are feeling overwhelmed. Same thing, like where do you find that time? Where do you draw that line? How do you say no to the people you have a hard time saying no to? Even though it's important, because if you're drained, you're not any good to anybody else. Where do they get started?
I think, there's the whole conversation of setting boundaries, which is a hard thing to do. But what I like to do with people who are struggling with time and really just, want to say yes to everything, going back to the whole calendar idea of really understanding that we have only 7 days in a week, and leveraging that to say, I've made this commitment to something else. So if we want to make this happen, here's my availability for that. So really being able to set boundaries, but also just understanding what your personal values are, because a lot of times we say yes to things because we want to be helpful and we want to do everything. We want to be able to do it all, but it's counterproductive when we say yes to everything and then can't execute in our best interest. So in an effort to define more boundaries, it's, really understanding what is it that's really truly important to you. Is integrity a big issue for you? So you want to be able to, produce high quality things for everything that you do. Is connection really important to you, and really using those values to drive your decisions, and then setting some really non-negotiable rules in your life, because for example, I have 2 kids, so I've set some boundaries around the times that I want to work. When my kids are at home, I shut the work off, and of course it's hard sometimes, and sometimes I veer off path, but generally when my kids are home, I'm not working, and so that's a huge non-negotiable for me. And then also I want to have one day in the weekend where I have absolutely nothing planned and I can just do things on a whim. And so, that's kind of my Saturday. And if something comes up and I can say yes to it, then that's fine. But otherwise, I kind of keep that open. So yeah, setting good boundaries, identifying your non-negotiables, and knowing your values are all huge things that you can do.
Great. So say you've already put some of these systems and rules in place day to day. How do you tell if they're good ones or if they're still good ones? Because maybe they're the ones you set 3 years ago and your life has dramatically changed since then. I'm assuming we have to go back and assess them once in a while to make them a little better, right? Yeah.
100%. One of the things that's the easiest thing that I can do with my clients and people that I work with is how to constantly be in self-awareness and reflection, because if you don't pay attention to those things, you don't really know how to change. And one of the coaching principles that I was taught is that the only constant is change. So there's never going to be this set routine that you're going to be able to crank out every single day if you're looking to be somebody who wants to grow. So you always have to really pay attention to the signals and the reactions that are happening with every choice that you make, and use that information, because it is your own data, to determine how to move forward. So as an example, one of the things that happened in my life was that I decided that I wanted to write a book, and in that time I had to put together a plan, and after the book came out, I had this, grand scheme of, how I wanted to sell it and pitch it and share it and promote it. And then life got in the way, and things changed in my family dynamic that I needed to address. So I had to kind of change those plans, and but I had to really be aware of what my priorities were in order to make, a comfortable decision about how to move forward. So I like to do, some strategic planning every 3 months, actually, and I always look a year out. I take some time to think about, am I still going in the right direction? Is the path that I envision for myself a year from now still the same? And if not, then how do I tweak it? So it's a constant process where I look at on a quarterly basis, am I on track? Do I want to do different things? Do I want to change course completely, or do I need to make some tweaks, or do I continue doing more of what I'm doing? And when you're doing that constant self-reflection, there's always that ability to, really stay focused on what is true for you in that moment. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So change and self-reflection are pretty scary topics for a lot of people, especially people that feel overwhelmed and are concentrating on their business. How do we break through some of those self-limiting beliefs and some of those fears that, like you said, life gets in the way? Sometimes life getting in the way is just, I'm not ready to deal with that yet, but we need to. So how do we get to that point where we say, hey, I need to make some of these assessments. I need to fix some of these rules. I need to not be afraid to make sure that I'm living a life that's aligned with everything I believe in.
Yeah, I think, and this is one of the tips that I share about work-life balance in my book, but one of the things that I think is really helpful for people who can really stay out of that overwhelm is being able to just be open to new possibilities and new things, and really just accepting the concept of change. Because if change is always going to happen, then and if we stay too rigid, we're just not going to be able to break away, and it's causing all this unnecessary stress and worry and fear. So just kind of embracing that change is going to happen, and sometimes when we are focused on we're scared to change, there's something about the change that's happening that's maybe not in alignment with our values. So really asking yourself, okay, this is a huge scary change. Why am I afraid? Asking the question, why is this making me so afraid? And is it because, I have to kind of change my system? Is it because it's big and scary and I'm not really sure what if there's going to be failure when that change happens? And I think it's also just, everybody likes to stay in their comfort zone. But, if you acknowledge that, pushing yourself beyond the comfort zone, if you're that type of person who really, really wants to achieve success that's beyond where you're at right now, that fear and busting through that comfort zone is going to be that that path that you're gonna need to take in order to get there. So, really just embracing it and almost thinking about maybe a roller coaster, right? When you get in there, you're like, okay, I have no idea what the twists and turns are, and I know that I'm going to be screaming, and I know that it's going to be scary, but at the very end, I'm going to have this amazing experience. And so really just enjoying the process and knowing that this fear is just part of it. It'll allow you to kind of release that negative energy that you associate with, the fear of change or just the fear of anything.
Perfect. One of the other things you talk about with your productivity work is streamlining people's lives to create spaciousness. Talk about what you mean by that and why you think that's important.
Streamlining your life so that you can create more spaciousness. I think this goes back to just the whole idea of when you see certain things that see different patterns that allow you to, work in a more productive way, you spend a lot less time thinking about like, how can I tweak this or how can I change that? And so focusing on the efficiency factor is just a great productivity tool. There's always a better way to do something. And if you can get into this process that just is seamless and just works and allows you to spend less time, in the weeds, then, with that automation, you just have more time to do other things and you can be more innovative. And I think that that's one of the things that we all struggle with. We don't want to be dealing with the administrative tasks and going through this lengthy process every time. So if you can figure out ways to automate, then you can kind of be hands off. And so, a lot of times in my business, there's ways where I'm always thinking about, how can I stop, worrying about being in my email all the time, or how can I, streamline the process of, bringing in leads where, I have a conversation and I can then just pass off to my team to address, how to onboard that client or whatnot. And it takes all of the pressure off of me, and I can actually spend more time focusing on actually getting leads and making those connections with people, the things that I can't delegate. So it's really just important to think about different ways that you can kind of hand off the small tasks that somebody else can do with a solid process.
Perfect. And I think a lot of what we talked about is in alignment with your typical business owner's mentality, efficiencies, creating more time. One thing you do touch on that I agree is really important is the concept of self-care. Your average business owner probably doesn't think about that and probably has a harder time relating that to saying, okay, I understand why this is valuable in my business. How does someone that's already overwhelmed and too busy putting employees or customers or their family ahead of themselves get that mentality shift to say, hey, I do have to take care of myself. I'm not going to be able to run this business or take care of my family. And what are those first steps?
I would definitely say that just kind of knowing stories of people who have burned out, I am definitely guilty of doing that. It was one of those things where I was running myself into the ground. I was neglecting my family, neglecting my health, neglecting just everything in my house. Everything was just so disorganized. And it got to a point where I lost a huge chunk of hair, and I was so oblivious to it that I waited until that point to make a change. And so I like to share that story because I feel like we all just wait until there's this signal that it makes us want to turn the ship around. And it's just not worth it to get there, because now I have to, for the rest of my life, deal with, anytime I get into a super stressful situation, like my hair starts to fall out. And it's just, granted, this is not the worst problem to have, but now it's just something I have to be careful with, and I have to, pay a lot in like medical bills and stuff like that to make sure that I'm, and just all these different stress management techniques just to, keep my stuff together. And it's a lot of time that now I have to commit to. And so just kind of having that awareness that if you continue down that path of overwhelm and stress, something is going to eventually be that trigger to send your body a signal that, or just send you a signal that you need to change. But if you can get ahead of the curve, and not to say that I have the magic potion for that, but I just like sharing my story as an example of, you're going to pay in different ways. And so that's why I think self-care is so important, even if it's just 5 minutes in a day that you can, leave your desk and walk around, or, I like to start random dance parties and stuff like that, or just get on the phone and talk to somebody to force myself to take a break. Those are the things, the things that bring me joy, or, forcing myself to say, okay, this Friday, I'm just taking the day off. I just need to do that. Really, really prioritizing, as little as 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever you can swallow, to just really influence yourself to, do more things that bring you joy. Because even though it's so hard to break away from focusing on work, that little break is going to immensely change your life just a little bit at a time. And we all want to take breaks anyways, right? So it's just giving yourself that permission and knowing that it's okay, that, work is always going to be there. The plate's always going to be full. But if you can just prioritize that self-care, it's going to, like, I know it's one of those things where it's really, really hard to believe, but just give yourself even 3 minutes to go take a break, go stand in the sun or whatnot, and you'll feel way more refreshed. So it's like, just trust me on that one.
No, I think that's great advice. And you're actually starting to see, do you ever follow Mark Waldman? He works with John Asseroff and some of those, but he talks about setting a timer and literally taking 2 minutes, an hour, just to even like rub your hand or stretch or whatever, just to give yourself that self-attention. So I don't think it's strange at all. I think people are becoming more aware, as we move into a more stressful, constantly bombarded by something kind of world. So I think that's great. When I was reading through your things, you had kind of an interesting structured approach to decision making. And I think a lot of our business owners face those kind of situations. So I'd love for you to talk about making decisions maybe a little bit easier than some of the ones when we get stuck in tough ones that we're afraid of.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I really stress when you're making decisions is that, one, you need to really pay attention to logic, right? What does logic tell you about the decision that you're making? And for people who are analytical, that's okay. But there's also this piece of, kind of feeling what it is in your gut. And so I'm kind of, tapping into intuition and your emotional set, because sometimes you can make a logical decision and it like makes you feel sick to your stomach. Like, okay, I know I should be doing this, but like, this doesn't feel good at all. And so you can make decisions that are logical, but if they don't feel like they're in alignment with your values or who you are authentically, they're probably not going to end up being successful in the end. I've tried a couple of marketing strategies, and just to kind of feel them out. But there's definitely some that I was like, okay, I don't like this, but I'm going to do it anyways. So there's that piece of just, listening to your gut, but also listening to logic. But the second piece of decision making that I also like to stress is that when you are trying to make a decision, there's a lot of things that slow you down in that decision, like fear, or your inner critic starts to play with your mind, and really just that thought of, maybe you might fail, or maybe this isn't going to work. You're going to expend all of this energy. And what I say to that is that, sometimes if you can reframe your perspective of failure, because sometimes you are afraid to make decisions because you're afraid of the failure. And if you can kind of embrace failure in a different way and say, well, even if I fail, it's going to get me one step closer to the success that I'm craving. So no matter what decision you make, there is literally no wrong answer, because if you find that you have a result that is not ideal, you can take that information and say, okay, now what? Okay, so I don't like this, I don't like doing Facebook ad strategies, or there's something about that I don't like. So, what does that mean in terms of the next decision I'm going to make? So if you just allow yourself to, make decisions quickly, go for it. And if it turns out great, then wonderful. And if it's not, then you have a little bit more information to make your next decision. And eventually you'll get to the success that you're working towards.
Perfect. I think we have time for one more question. This is a pure curiosity question, I'll admit that. But reading through your website, what is the Pomodoro Technique?
Pomodoro Technique. So this is similar to, the whole setting a timer situation. And this is a productivity technique that allows you to remain very, very focused for a small amount of time, where you kind of set aside everything else and you focus just on that one task. And so when I do this Pomodoro technique, I'll set a timer for 25 minutes and I'll say, okay, so I'm going to work on just rushing through my emails. And so I will do nothing else but that. I'll shut down every other piece of everything, and I'll just kind of sort emails or be very, very intentional about that 25 minutes. And when that timer's up, then I take a 5-minute break and I can do whatever I want with that break. And then I can start another one and say, okay, so next I'm going to work on this guest blog post, and I'm going to just write furiously until the timer ends. And what's great about it is that you're so super focused, and for people who like to procrastinate, this is a wonderful technique, because you have such a limited amount of time and you've got that pressure to just really get as much done in that time period. I used that to help me write my book. I did a 30 minutes a day of just furiously writing, and it really, really helped me get through some of the mental blocks of, writer's block and all of that, and help me move forward. So it's a super cool technique that I like to recommend to people who need more focus.
No, that's great. Actually, I've talked to Britt before. I have one of those Alexas at home. And honestly, that's what I use Alexa for half the time. It's music and setting timers, so I know when to stop what I'm doing and switch to the next thing so I can focus on one thing. Because I tend to be hyper-focused, but also easily distracted at the same time. Yes. So I'm one of those people that's like, oh, I need to go over here and do this. And then I get locked into that, and I'm like, oh, but I was doing that over there before. Yeah, this keeps me from moving to anything. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think this has all been great. Thank you very much. This has been
thank you so much for having me. This was an awesome conversation, and I'm, honored that I got to hang out with you guys.
No, I appreciate it. This is great. I think everyone on this will get a lot out of it. I know I did. As I was joking the other day, I'm like, the one great thing is a couple of these questions, just things I want to know as a long-term business owner. I get to talk to people and be like, hey, this is something I think would be interesting. So I think other people would too.
For sure.
So anyone that wants to follow up with you, stay in touch with you, where would you like us to send them?
You can visit my website at www.thecheerfulmind.com. If you're interested in the concept of work-life balance and that whole spiel, my book, Finding Success in Balance, My Journey to the Cheerful Mind, is available on Amazon and other major booksellers. And yeah, I'm on social media, so feel free to find me and reach out to me in any way that works for you.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure to have some of those links available so it's easy for everyone to get to you.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for your time. This has been great. And
Yeah,
we'll talk to you
thank
soon.
you.
Bye.
Bye.